The radio crackled to life for 3 clear seconds. Glenn Miller's horn section, bright as a Sunday morning, then dissolved back into static. Martin Driscoll sat back on his workshop stool, 68 years old and still patient with broken things. His father's radio, older than Martin by a decade, had been giving him fits all winter. The workshop smelled like it always did, WD-40 and pine sap, burnt coffee from the percolator he'd forgotten to turn off at dawn. Outside, December cold pressed against the windows. Inside, the wood stove ticked and pinged, keeping the temperature just warm enough that his breath didn't fog when he leaned in close to check the capacitors. The radio dial was stuck on AM 1340. Had been since his father died in '89. Martin figured he'd get it unstuck eventually. Measure twice, cut once. His father had taught him that. "Martin!" Linda's voice cut through from the doorway. She hadn't come out to the workshop in months. "We need to talk about Friday." He looked up. His wife stood in her good coat, the new one he hadn't seen before. Some kind of perfume he didn't recognize. "What's Friday?" "The Christmas party. At my office." Her voice had that edge it got lately. "You're coming." Martin wiped his hands on his jeans. The party. Corporate people. Folks in suits half his age, talking about things that didn't matter to men who worked with their hands. "Linda, I don't think I need you there, Martin. It's important." Something in her tone made his chest tighten. Not angry. Worse than angry. Distant, like she was already somewhere else, and he was just an errand she had to finish. "All right," he said. "I'll come." She nodded and left without another word. The workshop door clicked shut behind her. Martin stared at the radio. The dial stayed stuck. The static kept hissing. He should have trusted that feeling in his gut. The Sears suit still fit, more or less. Martin adjusted the collar for the third time as Linda drove them downtown. It scratched his neck. Too much starch, or maybe just too long since he'd worn anything but flannel and jeans. Through the truck window, Millbrook's main street slid past. Christmas lights strung between the old lampposts. "You'll like Craig," Linda said. Her eyes stayed on the road. "My boss. He's very successful." Martin didn't answer. His reflection in the side mirror looked older than he remembered. Gray hair, thinner on top. Deep lines around his eyes from 42 years of squinting at electrical panels. The Millbrook Grand Hotel parking lot was full of expensive cars. Linda pulled in next to a BMW with a vanity plate that read Exaki 1. Martin grunted. "What?" Linda asked. "Nothing." Inside the hotel, everything smelled like carpet cleaner and fake pine. The elevator ride up was quiet except for the mechanical hum and Linda checking her phone. She smiled at whatever she was reading, thumbs moving fast. Didn't show him the screen. The doors opened to Christmas jazz turned up too loud. The ballroom hit Martin like a wall of noise. Forced laughter, clinking glasses, conversations that competed to be heard over each other. He counted maybe 60 people, all of them dressed like they'd stepped out of a catalog. The youngest looked barely 30. Martin did the math. He could be grandfather to half the room. "There's Craig!" Linda's voice went bright in a way Martin hadn't heard in years. She touched his arm briefly, then moved toward a group near the bar. Martin followed, holding both their coats over his arm like a bellhop. The man Linda approached was tall, tan in December, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Martin's monthly pension. Gym muscles showed through the fabric. His handshake would be too firm. Martin knew the type. "Craig, this is Martin, my husband." Not my husband, Martin. This is Martin. We've been married 38 years. Just my husband." Like it was a job title. Craig turned, his smile professional and empty. "Oh, Linda's husband." He shook Martin's hand, firm, just like Martin expected. "The electrician, right?" "Retired," Martin said. "Must be weird being around all these executives." Craig gestured at the room, laughing. A few people nearby laughed with him. "Different world from, working with your hands?" The laughter spread, not cruel exactly, just casual. The kind of dismissal that didn't even realize it was cutting. Martin waited for Linda to say something. Anything. He'd wired half this town's homes. Taught safety classes at the community college. Served on the church council for 30 years. Linda adjusted her hair and looked away. "I'll get us drinks," Martin said. At the bar, his hands shook slightly as he ordered. White wine for Linda, beer for himself. The bartender was maybe 22, wearing a bow tie and looking bored. Martin carried the drinks back and found Linda in the same group. Craig was telling a story about some impossible client, his hand gestures big and confident. Everyone watched him, like he was the only person in the room worth hearing. Then Craig raised his glass for a toast. "To another record year at Pearson Commercial Realty." The group cheered. Craig's hand went to Linda's lower back as glasses clinked, and stayed there. Martin watched his wife lean slightly into the touch, saw Craig's thumb move in a small circle against the silk of her blouse, watched Linda laugh at whatever Craig said next, her face tilted up toward his, glowing in a way Martin hadn't seen directed at him in... How long? He approached the group. Craig's hand finally moved, casual, like it had never been there at all. "Everything okay?" Martin asked Linda. "Fine," she said, still not looking at him. "Craig was just telling us about the new development project." Craig glanced at Martin, sizing him up again. "Boring work stuff. I'm sure you'd rather talk about, what, football? Fishing?" More scattered laughs. Martin's jaw tightened. He tasted copper in his mouth, that metallic flavor that came with real shame. "Excuse me," he said. In the men's room, Martin stood at the sink, running cold water over his wrists. His reflection stared back. An old man in an old suit, out of place at a party where everyone spoke a language he'd never learned. Corporate, success, development projects. He'd spent 4 decades keeping people's lights on, crawling through attics in July heat, fixing panel boxes in January cold. Good, honest work. His father had done the same before him. But standing here, hands dripping, he couldn't shake the feeling that Craig was right. Different world, different life. And Linda belonged to that world now, not his. When he returned to the ballroom, Linda and Craig were standing close, heads together, sharing some private joke. Martin got both their coats. The party wound down around 9:30. The drive home took 20 minutes. Linda stared out the passenger window the entire time, her face reflected in the glass, somewhere far away. Martin gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. His knuckles showed white in the dashboard lights. At home, Linda went straight upstairs without a word. Martin heard the bedroom door close, then the shower running. A long shower, 30 minutes at least. He stood in the dark kitchen, still wearing his Sears suit, and replayed the evening. Craig's condescending smile, the scattered laughter, Linda's silence when she should have defended him. And then it hit him, clear and cold as January water. She hadn't said his name. Not once, the entire night. Not "my husband Martin" when she introduced him. Not "Martin thinks" or "Martin says" in any conversation. Just "my husband" that one time, like he was a thing she owned, not a person she'd chosen. When had he become invisible to her? When had he stopped mattering enough to have a name? Christmas Eve morning, Linda brought home a pecan pie from the bakery on Main Street. Martin's favorite, the kind with too much corn syrup and pecans that crunched just right. "Thought we could have a nice evening," she said, setting it on the kitchen counter. Martin looked up from his coffee. Linda wore sweatpants and one of his old flannel shirts, her hair pulled back like she used to wear it on Sunday mornings. For a moment, she looked like the woman he'd married in '87, young and tired in a good way, before the distance settled in. "That'd be nice," he said. That evening they sat together on the couch, watching some Christmas movie neither of them paid attention to. Linda leaned against his shoulder. Her hand rested on his arm, warm through the sleeve of his shirt. Martin felt something loosen in his chest, relief maybe, or hope. Maybe he'd been wrong about the party. Maybe Craig was just one of those guys who didn't know how to act around regular folks. During a commercial, Linda said, "I've been thinking." "About what?" "Us, getting older." She shifted slightly, not quite looking at him. "We should probably simplify things. This house, the property. 40 acres is a lot for one person to manage." Martin's hand tightened on his coffee mug. "2 people. You know what I mean." Her voice stayed casual, like they were discussing what to have for dinner. "Maybe we could sell the timber lot. Make life easier? Travel, maybe?" The timber lot. His father's land cleared by hand between 1950 and '52, every white oak along the fence line planted with purpose. Every corner marker driven into frozen ground with a sledgehammer and determination. "Dad cleared that land himself," Martin said. "I know, but he's gone, Martin, and it's just sitting there." "It's family legacy." Linda sighed and pulled away from him. "Forget I mentioned it." But Martin didn't forget. He filed it away, the way he filed spare parts in the workshop. Labeled, organized, waiting to be needed. Christmas morning, they exchanged gifts. Martin gave Linda the gardening book she'd marked in a catalog. Linda gave him work gloves, heavy-duty leather ones. Practical, the kind of gift you'd give a hired hand. 2 days later, Martin was getting coats from the hall closet for church when he found Linda's wool dress coat. Not the new one from the party, but the old one she'd worn for years. He checked the pockets for tissues out of habit. His fingers touched paper, not tissue, slick receipt paper. Millbrook Grand Hotel, room 412. December 20th, the night of the party. Timestamp, 11:47 p.m. Martin stood in the closet, staring at the numbers. The party had ended at 9. He'd checked his watch when they were leaving, noticed it was earlier than he'd expected. They'd been home by 9:30, but Linda had a hotel receipt from almost midnight. His chest felt tight. He carried the receipt to the kitchen table and sat down with it, reading it over and over like the words might change. Itemized charges, room rate, champagne, strawberries. He got up and checked the credit card statement online, something Linda didn't know he knew how to do. She'd always handled the finances. There it was, Millbrook Grand, $347. He scrolled up, October. Another charge. Different date. November. Another one. 3 months. 3 separate hotel charges. Martin pulled out a notebook from the junk drawer and started writing. Timeline, dates, charges. The electrician in him needed to see the pattern, understand the circuit, find where the connection had failed. December 20th party ended, 9:00 p.m., receipt timestamp, 11:47 p.m. Linda arrived home. 12:30 a.m. Martin had been in the workshop, heard the garage door. Linda had told him she left early with a headache. 2.5 hours unaccounted for, a hotel room. Champagne and strawberries. Martin created a folder, manila, labeled with his father's old label maker. Evidence, December 2024. He put the receipt inside, printed the credit card statement, added his timeline notes, hid it in the workshop behind the paint cans where Linda never went. When he came back inside, Linda was watching TV in the living room. Martin sat in his chair and studied her. 38 years of marriage, 2 kids raised, thousands of quiet evenings just like this one. She was a stranger now. Or maybe she'd been becoming a stranger for years, and he'd been too busy keeping the lights on to notice. December 29th, Linda packed a suitcase. Conference in Phoenix, she said, zipping it closed. Team building retreat, all the admin staff is going, back January 2nd. What kind of conference? Her eyes flashed irritation. Work stuff, Martin. You wouldn't be interested, but... She kissed his cheek, quick, obligatory, and left. Martin watched her drive away. Then he went to the workshop and added a note to his folder. Phoenix Conference, Deck 29 Jan 2. New Year's Eve came quiet and cold. Martin sat in the workshop with the wood stove burning, his father's radio still giving him static, a mug of coffee gone cold in his hands. Down the road, he could hear the neighbors having a party, laughter and music carrying on the winter air. Fireworks at midnight, bright blooms of color against the black sky. His phone stayed silent until 11:58 p.m. Then, a text from Linda. Happy New Year. No, I love you. No, wish you were here. Just a party hat emoji in silence. Martin opened the message properties. Sent from Pacific Standard Time. Phoenix was Mountain Time. 2 hours ahead of Pacific. Not behind. She wasn't in Phoenix. She was somewhere on the coast. California, probably. Oregon, maybe. Martin took a screenshot and added it to the folder. He sat in the dark workshop and wondered if this was what the rest of life looked like. 68 years old, alone on New Year's Eve, documenting his wife's lies like some sad detective in a movie nobody wanted to watch. The neighbor's party got louder. Someone was shouting the countdown. 10, 9, 8. Martin turned off the work light and sat in the red glow of the wood stove. When Linda came home on January 2nd, she had a tan. Desert tan, she'd say if he asked. But Martin had been to Phoenix in January. It was 70 degrees in the day, barely. Not tanning weather. And Linda's skin had that coconut sunscreen smell, the kind that came from resort pools and beach chairs. How was it? He asked when she came through the door. Good. Productive. She didn't meet his eyes. I'm exhausted. Going to unpack and rest. Martin nodded and went back to his coffee. In the workshop later, he added another note. Returned with tan, coconut sunscreen smell, not Phoenix. The folder was getting thicker. The evidence was piling up like kindling. He just wasn't sure yet what he was going to do with the fire. The letter came on January 5th, mixed in with the junk mail and utility bills, official letterhead, heavy paper stock. Evergreen Senior Transitions printed across the top in forest green. Martin sorted the mail at the kitchen table the way he always did. Bills to the left, junk to the recycling, anything important in the center. This one went to the center. He opened it with his father's old pocket knife. Dear Mr. Driscoll, this letter confirms your cognitive assessment appointment scheduled for January 18th at 10:00 a.m. As discussed with your primary contact, we will conduct a comprehensive evaluation of functional capacity and daily living skills. Martin read it twice, then a third time. He'd never scheduled an appointment. Didn't even know what Evergreen Senior Transitions was. He called the number printed at the bottom. A woman answered on the second ring, voice bright and professional. Evergreen Senior Transitions, this is Shelley. How can I help you? This is Martin Driscoll. I got a letter about an appointment on the 18th. Oh yes, Mr. Driscoll. Let me pull your file. Typing sounds. Here we are. Cognitive assessment, scheduled by your wife Linda on December 30th. Did you need to reschedule? December 30th, while Linda was supposedly at a conference, while she was actually getting a tan by some resort pool with... Martin didn't let himself finish that thought. Actually, I'm nearby, Martin said, keeping his voice steady. Could I stop in today to review the paperwork? Of course, we're open until 5. Martin hung up and stared at the letter. Cognitive assessment, functional capacity, primary contact, Linda. Why would his wife schedule a dementia evaluation behind his back? Evergreen Senior Transitions occupied a storefront in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparer. Inside, it smelled like industrial carpet and burnt coffee. Laminate furniture, motivational posters about aging with dignity, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. A young woman at the desk, Shelley probably, looked up with a practiced smile. "Can I help you?" "Martin Driscoll. I called about reviewing my paperwork." "Oh, yes. She tapped at her computer. "Let me grab your packet from the file room. Have a seat. I'll just be a minute." She disappeared through a doorway. Martin stayed standing. On her desk, he could see a file folder with his name on the tab. The phone rang. Shelley's voice echoed from the back room. "I'll get it in just a sec." Martin glanced at the folder. Then, before he could think better of it, he opened it. His name at the top. Linda Driscoll listed as primary contact. And then, in neat typed lines, "Patient presents with declining personal hygiene and grooming. Spouse reports confusion regarding bills and financial obligations. Wandering behavior observed. Difficulty maintaining household tasks. Recommendation: full capacity assessment coordinated with legal counsel re-guardianship options." At the bottom, Evergreen Legal Services. Guardianship consultation scheduled. Martin's hands went numb. Every single word was a lie. He showered every morning, paid bills on time, had a system, color-coded folders, never missed a due date. He didn't wander. He walked his property lines once a month, same as his father had done. Someone was building a case against him. Someone wanted him declared incompetent. His phone was in his hand before he realized he'd moved. He took photos of the pages, hands shaking, the camera clicking too loud in the quiet office. Shelley's footsteps in the hallway. Martin closed the folder. She came back holding a manila envelope. "Here's your—" She stopped, saw his face. "Are you okay, Mr. Driscoll?" "I need to reschedule," Martin said. "Work conflict." "Oh, no problem. Let me just—" But Martin was already moving toward the door. "I'll call back. Thank you." Outside, he sat in his truck for 10 minutes, reviewing the photos on his phone. Every line a fabrication. Declining hygiene, confusion, wandering. He drove to the library and looked up Evergreen Legal Services on the public computer. Their website was professional, clean, specializing in elder care law, guardianships, asset management, and estate planning. Martin clicked through case studies. One caught his eye. An elderly man placed under guardianship after a capacity assessment, his property sold to cover care costs, family members unable to intervene once the court appointed a guardian. The pieces clicked together like a circuit diagram. If Linda got him declared incompetent, she could sell the 40-acre timber lot, move him into a facility, control everything. And the land, his father's land, cleared tree by tree, marked with corner stakes driven into frozen ground, would be gone, sold, probably paved over for some development project. Martin thought about the property tax assessment he'd seen last year. The land was worth close to $800,000 now. Timber prices had gone up, location was good. That was a lot of money, enough to start over. Enough to run away with a man who drove a BMW with Ikseki 1 on the plates. That evening, Martin made dinner, leftover meatloaf, green beans from a can. Linda came home from work around 6, hung her coat, went straight upstairs. Martin was washing dishes when he heard her voice through the bedroom door. She was on the phone. Door cracked open just enough that her voice carried. "No, he doesn't suspect anything," Linda was saying. "He's completely clueless." Pause. Listening to whoever was on the other end. "The assessment's January 18th. After that, we move fast." Another pause. I know, but we need to be patient just a little longer." A laugh. Bright, eager. The kind of laugh she used to have, back when she laughed with Martin. He won't know what hit him, and by the time he figures it out, it's done. Longer pause now. "The property alone is worth $800K. We split it, everyone wins." Martin backed away from the stairs silently, turned on the kitchen faucet to cover the sound of his retreat, his heart hammered against his ribs. We split it. Linda wasn't alone in this. She had a partner, and Martin knew exactly who. When Linda came downstairs 10 minutes later, her face was composed, pleasant. "What's for dinner?" she asked. "Leftovers." Martin didn't turn from the sink. "I already ate." She shrugged, microwaved a plate, ate standing at the counter scrolling through her phone. Martin watched her from the corner of his eye. This stranger, in his kitchen, this woman he'd slept next to for 38 years. When had she decided he was disposable? When had his whole life become something she could just erase? Linda finished eating, rinsed her plate, and went back upstairs without a word. Martin dried his hands and went to the workshop. He added to his documentation folder notes from the phone call, screenshots of the Evergreen website, photos of the fabricated file. The folder was 3 inches thick now. He sat in the glow of the wood stove and wondered how you fight people who've already decided you don't exist. The weather forecast on January 14th called for 18 to 24 inches, high winds, sub-zero temperatures, the kind of blizzard that shut down roads and knocked out power lines. Linda announced she was going to visit her sister. Beat the storm, she said, throwing clothes into an overnight bag. Martin knew it was a lie. Linda's sister lived in Iowa, and they hadn't spoken in 5 years. But he said nothing, just watched her pack. "You'll be okay here?" she asked, not quite looking at him. "I've handled storms before." She left that morning. Martin watched her taillights disappear down the driveway, red dots swallowed by gray sky. He spent the afternoon preparing, stacked extra wood by the workshop stove and the house fireplace, filled the bathtub with water in case the pipes froze, checked the generator, made sure it had fuel. Old habits from a lifetime of rural winters. The blizzard hit at 3 o'clock. Wind came first, rattling the windows, howling around the corners of the house like something alive and angry. Then the snow, thick and horizontal, visibility dropping to nothing. The world disappeared into white static. Martin made dinner, canned soup, crackers, and ate standing at the kitchen counter. The house felt too big around him. 4 bedrooms, living room, dining room they never used anymore. All that space, and him alone in the middle of it. By 8 p.m., the power flickered, once, twice, then went out completely, 30 seconds of pure darkness before the generator kicked in. Martin stood in the kitchen, listening to it rumble to life. One lamp came on in the living room. The refrigerator hummed back to consciousness. He should stay in the house, warmer, safer. But the workshop called to him, the way it always did, when things got quiet. He bundled up, heavy coat, wool hat, work gloves, and trudged through knee-deep snow to the detached garage. The 50 feet felt like a mile. Wind cut through his coat, found every gap and seam. His breath came in short gasps, chest tight from the cold. Inside the workshop, he got the wood stove going and sat wrapped in an old wool blanket that scratched his neck. The generator was powering a single work light. Everything else was shadow in the orange glow of fire through the stove's glass door. His father's radio sat on the bench, still broken. Martin tried to fix it, something to do with his hands, keep his mind occupied. But his fingers were too cold, too stiff. The capacitors kept slipping. He dropped one and watched it roll across the concrete floor into darkness. He gave up, sat back. Listened to the wind scream? This was it then. 68 years old, alone, in a workshop during a blizzard, while his wife was probably in some warm hotel room with a man half her age, planning how to erase him. How to take everything his father had built and sell it to the highest bidder. Martin took inventory of himself. Knees that ached climbing stairs, blood pressure pills every morning, reading glasses for anything smaller than newspaper print. He could still wire a house, still fix most anything that broke. But it took longer now. His hands cramped. His back complained. The workshop walls were lined with tools, 42 years of accumulated equipment. But tools were just metal and wood. They only mattered if someone valued the hands that held them. He thought about his father. Died at 71, 3 years older than Martin was now. Never saw Martin's retirement. Never knew his son would end up like this, alone, fighting his own wife for the right to exist. His father's voice in his memory. Measure twice, cut once. Do it right or don't do it at all. Good advice for electrical work. But what about this? How did you do this right? A fragmented memory. Martin at 12, walking the property lines with his father's hand heavy on his shoulder, warm and solid, pointing out the corner markers, the boundary trees, the white oaks he'd planted. This land's yours someday, son. You take care of it, it takes care of you. But his father had never faced this. Never had someone he loved try to steal everything. Never had to choose between fighting and just letting go. Martin's eyes blurred. He wiped them roughly with the back of his glove, angry at the weakness. Men his age didn't cry. Men, his father's generation, sure as hell didn't. But the tears came anyway, silent in the dark workshop. Maybe Linda was right. Maybe he was diminished. Maybe easier to just let them have it all. The land, the house, everything. Let them put him somewhere with fluorescent lights and motivational posters. He could fade away quietly, stop being a problem. At 68, how much fight did he even have left? The wind rattled the workshop door. The pipes in the walls creaked, contracting in the cold. Martin stood, added another log to the fire, checked the pipes, still holding, barely, added another log. He looked at the documentation folder on the shelf, didn't open it, but didn't throw it away either. That was a decision, he supposed. Not surrender, but not fighting yet, just survival, 1 hour at a time. One log at a time. Like the blizzard itself, you didn't beat it, you just outlasted it. Morning came eventually. The blizzard cleared around dawn, leaving everything buried under 22 inches of fresh snow. The sky was pale blue, cold and indifferent. Martin shoveled a path from the house to the road. Slow, methodical work. His chest ached, his breath came out in clouds. But the physical labor felt good, purposeful, better than sitting in the dark thinking. A truck passed on the road. Wilson, the retired postal carrier who lived a quarter mile down. He slowed, rolled down his window. "You make it through okay, Martin?" Still standing. Wilson nodded. That's all any of us can do. Stay warm. He drove on. Brief human contact. A reminder that other people existed. That Martin existed to them, even if he didn't exist to his wife anymore. Martin finished shoveling and went back inside for coffee. Real coffee, not the instant junk he'd been drinking. He stood at the kitchen window, warming his hands on the mug, looking out at the property. That's when he saw them. Tracks in the fresh snow, leading along the property line. Someone had walked the perimeter. Recently, maybe an hour ago, the edges of the prints still sharp. Martin pulled on his boots and followed them. They led across his land, along the fence line, toward Nora Hutchins' property. Nora, his neighbor for 35 years, widow for the last 20, kept to herself mostly, but always waved from her kitchen window. The tracks ended at her back door. Martin looked up. Nora's kitchen curtain moved. Someone was watching. He stood there in the snow, cold seeping through his boots, and wondered, what had she seen? Why had she been walking his property in a blizzard? And more importantly, was he about to find out he had a witness to his own life? The car in the driveway wasn't Linda's. Budget sedan, maybe 10 years old, salt-crusted from winter roads. Martin was in the kitchen making lunch when he heard it pull up. Through the window, he watched his daughter get out. Beth, 42 years old, wearing a coat that looked thin for January. She'd lost weight. Her face was tired in a way that went deeper than missing sleep. Martin opened the door before she could knock. Beth? Hey, Dad. Awkward pause. Then she stepped forward for a hug. Martin returned it, stiff, both of them trying to remember how this was supposed to work. 5 years was a long time. You didn't call, he said. I know. Wanted to surprise you. But she came inside, stamping snow off her boots. Her eyes moved around the house, assessing or remembering. Martin couldn't tell which. Coffee? Please. They sat at the kitchen table. Martin poured 2 mugs. Beth wrapped her hands around hers like she was cold. Maybe she was. How are the kids? Martin asked. Beth pulled out her phone, showed him pictures. The grandkids had grown. His grandson was 10 now, gap-toothed in the photo. His granddaughter was 7, wearing a soccer uniform. They're good, Beth said. Growing too fast. They do that. More silence. Martin sipped his coffee and waited. Beth hadn't driven 2 hours in January just to show him photos. Mom called me, Beth finally said. She's worried about you. There it was. Martin set down his mug carefully. Worried how? Just, you know. Beth's eyes didn't quite meet his. Living alone out here. Getting older. She said you've seemed stressed. I'm not alone. Your mother lives here. You know what I mean, Dad. But Martin didn't. Or maybe he did. And that was worse. I'm 68, not 88, he said. I manage fine. I know you do. Mom just seemed really concerned. Beth paused. Can I stay a few days? Haven't visited in so long. Martin thought about saying no, about protecting whatever was about to happen. But she was his daughter. You didn't turn away your daughter, even if she came carrying questions that felt like knives. Your room's the same, he said. Beth settled in, brought her bag upstairs to the bedroom that still had her high school volleyball trophies on the shelf. Martin made chili for dinner, his specialty, the one thing he could cook that people actually asked for. Over dinner, they talked around the silence. Town changes. Old neighbors who'd moved or died. Beth's job, administrative work now, after the divorce. The pay cut was obvious in the cheap coat, the older car. They didn't talk about why she hadn't visited in 5 years. Didn't talk about the business loan Martin had refused to co-sign, the loan her ex-husband had wanted for some scheme that fell apart 6 months later anyway. Beth had been furious then, said Martin was choosing money over family. Martin had tried to explain it wasn't about the money. It was about not enabling bad decisions. But Beth hadn't wanted to hear it. She'd stopped calling, stopped visiting. Until now. The next morning, Beth offered to help with paperwork. Mom mentioned you've been stressed about bills, she said. Want me to set up a better filing system? Martin's guard went up. I've got a system that works. Can I see it? He showed her the bill folder. Color-coded tabs for each month, every payment logged in his handwriting, amounts and dates clear, all current, nothing late, nothing confused. Beth looked relieved, or maybe disappointed. Martin couldn't tell. That afternoon, she suggested a walk. Fresh air, she said. But once they were outside, tramping through the snow along the property line, Beth said, 40 acres is a lot for one person to handle. 2 people, Martin corrected. I just mean, it's okay to need help, Dad, or to downsize. This place must be exhausting to maintain. Martin stopped walking. Your grandfather cleared this land by hand. Every tree, its family legacy. I know that. I'm not saying, Beth fumbled for words. I'm just saying it's okay to let go, if you need to. I don't need to. Tension hung between them. They walked back to the house in silence. That evening, Martin made coffee and brought Beth a mug. She sat at the kitchen table with a small notebook, writing something. "Do you ever forget where you put things?" she asked. Casual. Too casual. "Like keys or your wallet?" Martin's chest tightened. "Sometimes, same as anyone." What about appointments? Do you ever mix up dates?" "I keep a calendar." He pointed to the wall calendar by the phone. Every appointment marked clearly, color-coded, doctor visits in blue, church council meetings in green, property tax due dates in red. Beth wrote something in her notebook. "Why are you asking these questions?" Martin said. "Just want to make sure you're okay." "Did your mother ask you to check on me?" Beth hesitated. "She's concerned about what specifically? That maybe you need more support as you get older?" And the words hung there. Support. As you get older. The same language from the Evergreen file. Declining capacity. Needs assistance. "I'm fine," Martin said. His voice came out harder than he meant. "You can tell your mother I'm fine." Beth looked down at her notebook. "I will." The next morning, Beth packed to leave. "I'll check in more often," she said at the door. "Okay?" "Okay." She hugged him. Her eyes were wet. "I love you, Dad." Martin hugged her back, confused by the tears. Guilt or manipulation? Genuine concern or rehearsed emotion? "Love you too, Wyatt," he said. He watched her drive away. Then he went back inside and saw it. Beth's notebook on the coffee table. Forgotten. Or left intentionally. Martin sat down and opened it. The first pages were notes from their conversations. His answers about bills, memory, daily routines. Then a printed checklist. Assessment criteria for cognitive decline. Each item checked. Bill confusion? No. Hygiene issues? No. Memory lapses? Normal for age. Wandering? No. Beth's handwriting at the bottom. Dad seems completely competent, sharp, organized, managing well. Martin turned the page. Linda's handwriting now. Beth must have taken notes during a phone call. Don't say he's incompetent directly. Just emphasize he seems tired, forgetful. Nothing dramatic. And below that, this is for his own good, and yours. That property's your inheritance. We can sell it, split the money. Everyone's secure. More of Linda's instructions. What to observe, what to report. How to build a case without being obvious about it. The final page, Beth's handwriting again. "I don't know if I can do this. He seems fine." And at the very bottom, recording everything, just in case. Martin closed the notebook. His hands were shaking. His own daughter had been sent to gather evidence against him, to document his decline, build Linda's case for guardianship. But Beth had documented the opposite. The truth, that Martin was fine, competent, sharp. She'd left the notebook behind. Accidentally? Or was this her way of warning him? Martin didn't know. But he added the notebook to his documentation folder. Whatever Beth's intentions, her notes proved Linda had tried to recruit her, proved the conspiracy went beyond Linda and Craig, proved they were pulling family into this. And somewhere in those pages was a mention of recording. Beth was documenting something. But what? Martin sat in his workshop and realized he couldn't do this alone anymore. Pride had gotten him this far. Silence had kept things manageable. But they were pulling in reinforcements, recruiting allies, building their case. Maybe it was time he did the same. He thought about Nora, about the tracks in the snow, about her kitchen window that faced his property. Maybe it was time to find out what she'd seen. The knock came late on a January afternoon, the sun already fading behind the trees. Martin opened the door to find Nora Hutchins standing on his porch in a heavy coat, holding a manila folder against her chest. "Martin," she said, "we need to talk." He let her in. She stamped snow off her boots and came straight to the kitchen table, set the folder down with purpose. "I know about Linda and that Craig fellow," she said. Martin froze. "What?" "I've seen his car, that BMW with the ridiculous license plate." Nora pulled out her coat and sat down. "Weekday afternoons, when you're at the hardware store or church council meetings, I've been keeping track." She opened the folder. Inside were photos, Craig's BMW in Martin's driveway, 12 different occasions. Each photo had a timestamp written in careful handwriting. Dates going back to September. "I started noticing in October," Nora said. "Thought it was odd, a car like that at your place, when Linda should have been at work. Then I saw them together. Through your kitchen window. Close, you know. Too close." Martin stared at the photos. Professional-level documentation. Systematic. Thorough. Nora pulled out more evidence. A gold bracelet, engraved with L&C. Found this in the snow by the property line during the blizzard," she said. "They'd met outside. I saw them from my window. Linda must have dropped it." Martin picked up the bracelet. Heavy. Expensive. Intimate. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Nora's eyes welled up. Her papery hand reached across the table and covered his. "Because I didn't speak up 30 years ago," she said. "My husband had an affair in '93. I knew. I saw the signs, but I stayed silent. Thought I could save the marriage by ignoring it. Her voice cracked. He died in a car accident with her, left me with all this grief and shame and regret. How much she squeezed Martin's hand. I should have stood witness, should have demanded truth. I won't make that mistake twice. Nora, and there's something else. She pulled a tissue from her pocket, dabbed her eyes. Your father helped my family in '78. We were going to lose this house. Couldn't get a loan anywhere. Your dad co-signed, without even hesitating. Said that's what neighbors do. Martin remembered, vaguely. He'd been 21, just starting out as an electrician. I've never forgotten that, Nora said. Your father's kindness. And I'll be damned if I let anyone erase his son. Martin felt something crack open in his chest. Relief, maybe, or gratitude, or just the simple fact of not being alone anymore. I called my grandson, Nora continued. Jake. He's a paralegal over at Fletcher & Sons. I told him what was happening. He wants to meet you. What can he do? Help you fight, legally, the right way. Nora's voice went hard. They think old folks don't notice things. They're wrong. Jake arrived within the hour. 28 years old, earnest face, worn backpack that had seen better days. He shook Martin's hand with genuine respect. Mr. Driscoll, Grandma told me you need help. Just Martin. Jake sat at the kitchen table and reviewed everything. Hotel receipts, evergreen file photos, Beth's notebook, Nora's documentation. He took notes on a legal pad, methodical and focused. Finally, he looked up. This is elder abuse conspiracy and adultery, and he explained. Their state allowed fault-based divorce for adultery, which affected asset division. The forged medical records were criminal fraud. If Craig was involved in the scheme, he could face civil and possibly criminal charges. Here's what we do, Jake said. First, get an independent cognitive assessment immediately. Prove you're competent. Second, file for divorce citing adultery before Linda can file a guardianship petition. Third, document everything, which you're already doing. Fourth, depose the Evergreen staff about how false information got in your file. And fifth, subpoena Craig's business records. Martin's head spun. Why his business records? Because I'm betting there's a property angle here. Jake pulled out his laptop. I did some preliminary research. Craig's company filed permits last October for something called Millbrook Estates Development. I want to dig deeper. How much will this cost? Nora interrupted. Jake's not charging family. Grandma's right, Jake said. Your dad taught me electrical safety when I worked construction summers. Kept me from getting killed on job sites. Consider this payback. Another debt, another generation. Martin felt the weight of it. His father's kindness rippling forward through time, returning when he needed it most. This'll take time, Jake warned. Maybe 3 or 4 months. Can you handle that? I've got nothing but time. Jake scheduled an independent assessment with Dr. Patricia Alvarez, a geriatric specialist with a good reputation. He also started preparing divorce paperwork. 3 hours passed. Coffee was consumed. Documents were organized. A plan took shape on Jake's legal pad. When Jake finally packed up to leave, he paused at the door. One more thing. Let me check those business filings for Craig's company. If there's a land development angle, it'll be in the permits. You think this is about more than just the affair? Millbrook Estates Development, Jake repeated. Mean anything to you? Never heard of it. Then I'll find out what it is. Jake shouldered his backpack. Stay strong, Martin. You're not fighting alone anymore. After they left, Martin sat in the quiet kitchen. For the first time in weeks, the silence didn't feel oppressive. It felt like breathing room. Space to think, to plan, to act. He wasn't invisible. Nora had been watching. Jake was helping. Community mattered. Witnesses mattered. Maybe, Martin thought, he could actually win this. The assessment with Dr. Alvarez was scheduled for February 2nd. Martin showed up early, nervous but determined. 2 hours of memory tests, problem-solving exercises, functional ability evaluations. Dr. Alvarez was professional but warm. Put him at ease. The report arrived a week later. Martin opened it with steady hands this time. Patient demonstrates excellent cognitive function for age 68. Memory, above average. Judgment and reasoning, sound and appropriate. Functional ability, fully independent. No evidence of cognitive impairment or decline. The report specifically addressed the evergreen claims. Patient maintains excellent hygiene and grooming. Bills and finances meticulously organized. No evidence of wandering or confusion. Conclusion. Claims in external file appear to be fabricated. Martin read it 3 times. Each time, the words felt more real, more solid. He wasn't incompetent. They were lying. He made copies. One for Jake, one for his documentation folder. The original filed with the county clerk as public record. Paper trail established. Martin Driscoll was competent. It was official. That evening, Jake called. "Found the permits," he said. "You need to see this. Craig's development project is huge, and Martin, it needs your land." Come by tomorrow," Martin said. "I'll be there tonight." Martin hung up and stared out the kitchen window at the property, his father's land. 40 acres cleared by hand, white oaks planted with purpose. Corner markers driven into frozen ground. They weren't trying to erase him just for Linda's comfort or Craig's ego. They were trying to erase him for money? Jake spread the documents across Martin's kitchen table like he was laying out evidence at a crime scene, which Martin supposed he was. "Millbrook Estates Development," Jake said, tapping a map. 200 acres, luxury homes, $8 to $12 million total project. Craig's company filed preliminary permits October 15th. Martin leaned in. The map showed property boundaries, 6 parcels highlighted and assembled, and there, in the southwest corner, was his 40 acres. "That's my land," Martin said. "That's the access road." Jake traced a line with his finger. "Without your property, the entire development is landlocked. Can't build, can't sell. Project's dead." Martin stared at the map. His father's land, reduced to a line on a developer's blueprint. The white oaks his father had planted, just obstacles to be cleared. The corner markers driven into frozen ground in 1952, just inconvenient boundaries to be moved. Jake pulled out a timeline. September 1st, Linda starts working for Craig. October 15th, permits filed. December 20th, hotel affair. December 30th, Linda schedules your evergreen assessment. See the pattern? Martin saw it. Clear as a wiring diagram. Craig needed the land. Linda was the way to get it. The affair wasn't about love. It was about access. They figured if Linda got guardianship, she could sell the property, Jake said. Split the proceeds. You'd be in a facility somewhere, and your father's land would become Millbrook Estates. Phase 1. Martin's hands clenched. Commission on a $12 million project? 500,000, maybe $1 million for Craig? Your land's worth about $800K. Linda gets 400 after the split. Jake closed the laptop. They underestimated you. Thought you wouldn't fight. They thought I was already gone, Martin said quietly. What do you want to do? Martin looked at the documents, the map, the timeline, evidence, facts, the truth laid out in black and white. File for divorce, he said. No. February 10th. Jake filed the divorce petition with the county court. Fault-based, grounds, adultery. Every piece of evidence attached, hotel receipts, photos, timestamps, Nora's witness statement, Dr. Alvarez's assessment included as rebuttal to any incompetence claims. Public record. Anyone could access it. Martin chose where Linda would be served. Her office at Pearson Commercial Realty. Midday, colleagues present. A deliberate choice. The process server delivered the papers February 11th at noon. Linda called 20 minutes later. Martin was in the workshop when his phone rang. "How dare you?" Her voice shook with fury. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone." "What, you mean like you embarrassed me at your Christmas party? This is vindictive. You're making a huge mistake." "The mistake was trusting you. My lawyer will bury you, Martin. You'll end up with nothing." Martin kept his voice level. "I've got nothing to hide. Can you say the same?" Silence. Then, "You're incompetent. Everyone will see it in court. I've got an independent assessment that says otherwise." He heard her breathing change. Sharp intake of air. "Assessment dated February 2nd, Martin continued. "Filed with the county on February 3rd. Public record. Anyone can read it." You... Linda's voice went thin. "You set me up." "I documented. There's a difference." Martin hung up. 3 hours later, a letter arrived via courier. Linda's attorney, Sharon Voss from Evergreen Legal, thick letterhead, threatening language, accused Martin of elder abuse, claimed his paranoid delusions were harming Linda, threatened to file a guardianship petition, argued Martin was incompetent to handle divorce proceedings. Jake read it and laughed. Standard intimidation. They're panicking. "Good," Martin said. Jake filed subpoenas, one for Evergreen, who initiated the assessment, who provided false information, one for Craig's company, business correspondence, development plans, financial projections. Both served February 12th. Craig's attorney responded immediately. "Mr. Pearson has no involvement in the Driscoll divorce." Jake sent back the timeline chart and property map. No further response. Over the next 2 weeks, Martin built his case with the same precision he'd once used wiring houses, documentation, testimonials, evidence. He gathered statements from neighbors. Wilson, the retired postal carrier. "Martin's been sharp as ever, manages the property perfectly. Pastor Jim from church. Serves on our council, handles the accounts responsibly." Marge from the diner. "Comes in every Saturday, same time, same order. Mine's clear as a bell." Each person wrote their statement, signed it, had it notarized. Martin photographed everything. His organized workshop, his clean house, his meticulously maintained property, bank statements showing no unusual spending, property tax records paid on time every year since his father's death in '89, medical records, routine checkups, blood pressure medication, no cognitive concerns. Jake compiled it all into a trial notebook. Sections for adultery evidence, conspiracy evidence, Martin's competence, financial motives. "We need to get everyone in a room," Jake said. On the record. He scheduled what he called a family meeting at Fletcher & Sons law office. Neutral space, court reporter present. Technically voluntary, but Jake noted in the invitations that non-attendance would be mentioned in divorce proceedings. Linda's attorney advised against it, but Linda confirmed she'd attend, and she was bringing Craig. Mistake. The date was set, February 28th, 10 a.m. Martin spent the days between preparing, walking the property lines, grounding himself in the land his father had cleared. Nora waved from her window each morning. Community watch continuing. Beth called twice. Martin didn't answer, but he listened to the voicemails. "Dad, please call me. I need to tell you something. It's important." He saved the messages but didn't call back. Whatever Beth had to say, she could say it at the meeting, if she showed up. February 27th, evening. Martin reviewed all the evidence one final time. The documentation folder was 3 inches thick now. Timeline chart covered 6 months. Everything connected. Affair to permits, to assessment, to property scheme. He called Jake. "I'm ready. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., everyone will be there." "Good," Martin said. "Let's finish this." He hung up and looked at his father's radio on the workshop bench. Still broken. Still giving him static. But he'd get it fixed. Eventually. Right now, he had other things to restore. Fletcher & Sons occupied a 2-story brick building on Main Street, the kind of law office that had been there since before Martin was born. Wood paneling, law books lining the walls, portraits of old attorneys in serious poses. The radiator in the conference room hissed and pinged, filling silences with metallic percussion. The court reporter arrived first, setting up her stenograph machine with efficient movements. Mr. Fletcher came next, 60-something, silver hair, 3-piece suit. He nodded at Martin with professional courtesy. Martin and Nora arrived at 9:50. Martin wore a clean button-down shirt and his father's watch. He carried the documentation folder, substantial in his hands. They sat on one side of the long conference table. Linda and Craig arrived at 10:02. Linda, in a professional Navy suit, armor against what was coming. Craig in an expensive charcoal gray, trying to own the room through presence alone. Linda's attorney, Sharon Voss, tried to follow them in. "This isn't a formal deposition," Mr. Fletcher said. "Counsel may wait outside." Voss's jaw tightened. "My client has a right to representation. Your client is free to leave at any time. But this meeting proceeds without attorneys present." Voss shot Linda a look. "Don't say anything," then stepped into the hallway. The door closed behind her with a solid click. Linda and Craig sat across from Martin. The table between them felt like a border between countries at war. 10:08. Beth rushed in, breathless. "Sorry, traffic." She sat at the end of the table, apart from everyone. "Switzerland," Fletcher explained the procedure. "This is informal information gathering before formal proceedings. Everything is on the record. Statements can be used in court. Anyone can leave any time, but departure will be noted." The court reporter's fingers hovered over her machine. "Ready." "Mr. Hutchins," Fletcher said. "You may begin." Jake opened his trial notebook. Linda shifted in her chair. Craig crossed his arms, jaw set. Martin sat perfectly still, hands folded on the table. Jake presented the timeline first. A poster board version, blown up so everyone could see. Dates in black marker, events in red. September, Linda starts at Pearson Commercial Realty. October 15th, Millbrook Estates permits filed. December 20th, hotel receipt, room 412. January 18th, assessment scheduled. "Mr. Pearson," Jake said, "do you deny having a relationship with Mrs. Driscoll?" Craig's voice was smooth, practiced. "My personal life isn't relevant to these proceedings." "It's relevant when your business depends on Mr. Driscoll's property." Jake laid out the development map. Millbrook Estates, 200 acres, Martin's 40 in the southwest corner highlighted in yellow. "Your project needs road access," Jake said. "Mr. Driscoll's land provides that access. Without it, your development is landlocked." Craig's face hardened. "There are lots of properties in this area, but only one owned by your lover's husband." Jake presented the photographs. Craig's BMW, XEQ1 vanity plate visible, parked in Martin's driveway. 12 dates, timestamps in Nora's careful handwriting. "Mrs. Hutchins documented your visits," Jake said. "Weekday afternoons, when Mr. Driscoll was at church or the hardware store." Nora spoke for the first time, her voice steady. "I watched from my kitchen window. I saw you together." Craig's tan seemed to fade. Jake presented the hotel receipts. December, November, October. Room charges, champagne, strawberries. Each receipt a small paper knife. Mrs. Driscoll, Jake said. Did you initiate the cognitive assessment at Evergreen Senior Transitions? Linda's voice was defensive. I was concerned about Martin's health, Martin spoke. Just 2 words, but they cut through the room like wire through insulation. You lied. Everyone went quiet. Even the radiator seemed to pause. I've never had hygiene issues, Martin continued. His voice was level, factual. Never confused bills, never wandered. Jake presented Dr. Alvarez's assessment, pages highlighted in yellow. Independent evaluation, February 2nd, filed as public record. Linda's voice went thin. You're embarrassing yourself, Martin. Everyone knows you've been struggling. Who's everyone? Linda glanced at Craig. Just a flicker of eye contact, but it was enough. Collusion visible for the court reporter to note. Jake presented the photographs of the Evergreen file. False claims circled in red marker. These statements are fabricated, Mrs. Driscoll. Fletcher leaned forward. False medical reports constitute fraud in this state. Linda's composure cracked. I didn't forge anything. I just provided observations. Observations that were demonstrably false? The radiator hissed in the silence. Linda tried again. I was trying to help. He needs assistance. He's just too proud to admit. Mrs. Driscoll, Jake interrupted. He pulled out Beth's notebook. This was left by your daughter after her visit. It contains notes from a phone conversation with you. Beth stood suddenly. Wait. All eyes turned to her. I can't do this anymore. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone. Set it on the table like it weighed 100 pounds. Mom called me 3 weeks ago. She asked me to check on Dad. Beth's voice broke. She coached me on what to say. She pressed play. Linda's voice came through the speaker, tinny but clear. You don't have to lie, honey. Just emphasize he seems tired, forgetful. Beth's voice, younger and uncertain. Mom, I don't know if I can... Linda, this is for his own good and yours. That property's your inheritance. We can sell it, split the money. Everyone's secure. Beth, what if he's not actually incompetent? Linda, he's 68 and living alone. Of course he's declining. The recording continued. Linda detailing what Beth should observe, what to report to support the assessment, how to build a case without being obvious. The conference room was silent except for Linda's voice on the recording and the radiator's metallic breathing. When it ended, Beth was crying. I came to check, and Dad's fine. He's totally fine. She turned to Martin. I'm sorry, Dad. I should have told you immediately. Martin nodded. His throat was too tight to speak. Linda's face had gone white. Beth, you don't understand. I understand you wanted me to lie so you could steal Dad's land. Craig stood. I don't have to listen to this. Mr. Pearson, Fletcher's voice carried authority. Given the financial interest revealed here in the question of forged medical documents, you may want to consult your own attorney. The district attorney may have questions. Craig sat back down, slowly. Jake closed his notebook. For the record, Mr. Driscoll will proceed with fault-based divorce. He'll seek full ownership of all marital property, including the 40-acre parcel known as the Driscoll Timber Lot. Sharon Voss was called back in. She listened to a summary of the recording, her professional mask slipping. She leaned close to Linda and whispered, Don't say anything else. But Linda kept talking, desperation bleeding through. Martin, please. We can work this out. Marriage counseling, mediation. Martin stood. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it filled the room. You called me incompetent. You tried to have me declared mentally unfit. You planned to erase me. He looked at her directly for the first time all morning. This land was my father's. He cleared it by hand, tree by tree. He trusted me to protect it. He turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing to say. I loved you for 38 years, but I loved my father longer, and I won't betray him for you. Martin walked out. Nora followed. Beth hesitated, then came after them. The conference room door closed behind them with a solid final sound. In the parking lot, Martin stood in the cold February air and breathed fully for the first time in months. His lungs expanded, his chest opened. The sky was gray, but the air was clean. Beth touched his arm. Dad, I'm so sorry. You came around, Martin said. That's what matters. Nora squeezed his other arm. 3 generations standing in a parking lot, cold wind cutting between them, but none of them feeling it. Martin looked at them. Community, family, witnesses, people who'd stood up when it mattered. Thank you, he said. It was enough. The divorce moved through the system like water through pipes. Inevitable, methodical, no fanfare. Linda moved out within a week, stayed with her sister 2 towns over. The lawyers handled everything. Martin didn't attend the hearings. Sent Jake instead. March 15th, the decree arrived in the mail. 38 years of marriage, dissolved in a 45-minute hearing. Martin got the property, all 40 acres. Premarital inheritance, the judge ruled. Linda's adultery didn't help her case. She got minimal spousal support, her name removed from the deed. Martin filed the paperwork in his cabinet and went back to his coffee. The district attorney opened an investigation into Craig and Evergreen. Elder abuse conspiracy, fraud, forged medical records. The investigation would take months, maybe years. Martin didn't need to see Craig in handcuffs. Knowing the state was watching him was enough. Craig's development project stalled. Investors got nervous, started pulling out. Without Martin's land, Millbrook Estates was just expensive blueprints and wishful thinking. Late March, Craig's attorney called Jake with a settlement offer. Not for the whole property, just 5 acres, the southwest corner, enough for road access, fair market value, $120,000. Jake brought the offer to Martin. You don't have to accept, you won. Martin looked at the property map, thought about his father. The old man had been practical above all else. Land was for using, not hoarding. 5 acres out of 40. The core legacy intact, protected. Counter with 150, Martin said, and a permanent easement protecting the other 35 from any development. Ever. Jake smiled. I'll draw it up. Craig accepted within a day. Desperate men don't negotiate hard. Martin put the money in a trust for Beth's kids' education fund. The land providing, just like his father said it would. Beth started visiting on Sundays, a new tradition, unspoken but regular. They'd walk the property together, Martin showing her what mattered. The corner markers, iron stakes his father had driven in 1952, still solid in the ground. The property lines marked in the trees, blazes his father had cut with a hatchet. The seasonal creek that ran along the north boundary. The white oaks, planted when Martin was a boy, grown tall and strong now. Beth took notes, asked questions. Not about inheritance, about history, about connection. Grandpa cleared this all by hand? She asked one Sunday. Every tree took him 3 years. They reached the southwest corner, the original marker. Martin touched the iron stake, warm from spring sun. Do you think he'd be okay with selling those 5 acres? Beth asked. Martin considered. He'd understand protecting the 35. That was always the point. Keep what matters. Beth nodded. They walked back to the house in comfortable silence. Over coffee, Beth said, the kids want to visit, see where their great-grandpa lived. Bring them, Martin said. I'll show them the workshop. Early April brought true spring, the kind that smelled like thawed earth and new grass. Martin spent a Saturday finishing the radio restoration. Final adjustments, dial freed at last, tubes replaced, antenna properly aligned. He plugged it in. Turned the dial slowly, static. Then, clear as Sunday morning, Glenn Miller's Moonlight Serenade filled the workshop. Big band horns, smooth and bright, his parents' wedding song. The song they danced to in the kitchen when Martin was young. His father singing along, his mother laughing. Martin sat on his workshop stool and listened. He realized his father's voice wasn't in the radio, never had been. It was in the land outside, in the lessons learned, in the choice to stand and fight instead of fade away. His morning routine settled into new patterns. Coffee at 5, same as always. But now, Beth sometimes joined him when she visited. Workshop projects resumed, fixing Wilson's lamp, building a bookshelf for Nora, church on Sundays. Pastor Jim shook his hand after service. Your father would be proud, Martin. Mabel, the church gossip, actually apologized. I'm sorry for what I said. About Linda. I should have known better. Martin just nodded. No point holding grudges. Life was too short. The property changed with the season. New boundary markers on the 5 acres he'd sold, clearly delineated. The remaining 35 protected by legal easement, no development, no subdividing, ever. Crocuses bloomed by the fence line, purple and determined. The white oaks budded. Birds returned, filling the morning with song. Martin walked the property alone most days, but it was chosen solitude now. Not forced, not lonely, just quiet. Nora waved from her window each morning. Martin waved back, the ritual of witnesses continuing. One Saturday afternoon, Martin was in the workshop, door open to let spring air flow through. The radio played, big band music, static-free now, perfect. Coffee steamed in his father's old mug. The property deed lay on the workbench, his name clear and legal. Through the open door, he could see crocuses nodding in the breeze, hear birds in the white oaks, smell the earth waking up after winter. Martin smiled. Small, private. He didn't need an audience for this victory. He'd stood up. He'd mattered. He'd protected what his father built. That was enough. A car pulled into the driveway. Beth's sedan. Doors opened. Kids' voices, high and excited. Great-grandpa, his grandson's shout carried across the yard. Martin stood, turned down the radio, walked to the workshop door. Beth was there with both kids. His grandson, 10 years old and gap-toothed. His granddaughter, 7, wearing light-up sneakers. They wanted to see where you work, Beth said. Martin looked at the kids, at Beth, at the property spreading out behind them in spring green. Come on in, he said. Let me show you what your great-great-grandfather built. The kids rushed forward, full of questions and energy and life. Legacy wasn't frozen in the past. It was this, right here, right now, passing down what mattered. Teaching the next generation what ground they stood on and who had cleared it. The radio played softly behind him. The spring breeze carried the smell of thawed earth and new beginnings. Martin Driscoll, 68 years old, stood in his workshop doorway with his family around him and felt something he hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not happiness, something deeper, truer. The peace of a man who'd been tested and didn't break, who'd been told he didn't matter and proved them wrong, who'd been offered erasure and chose to stand witness to his own life. Some battles you win not by shouting, but by refusing to disappear. There are things Martin lost that spring. Can't pretend otherwise. 38 years of marriage, gone. The woman he'd loved when she was 27 vanished into someone he didn't recognize. That kind of loss leaves marks, the way weather leaves marks on old wood. But there are things he kept. His father's land. His own name on the deed. The white oaks still standing. The corner markers still solid in the ground. And something harder to measure, but just as real. The knowledge that when they tried to erase him, he refused to fade. That matters. Especially when you're 68 and the world keeps telling you your time is done. See, getting old doesn't mean getting gone. Not if you stand witness to your own life. Not if you refuse to believe the lie that aging equals obsolescence. Martin learned something those hard winter months. Community isn't just friendly waves and church potlucks. It's Nora keeping watch when no one thinks anyone's watching. It's Jake giving his time because someone helped his grandmother 40 years back. It's Beth choosing truth when lying would have been easier. We need witnesses. People who see us, who remember, who stand up when it counts. And sometimes the quietest victories are the ones that last. Martin didn't destroy Craig. Didn't humiliate Linda beyond what she'd done to herself. He just documented. Stood firm. Let the truth do its work. His father used to say, measure twice, cut once. Turns out that applies to more than electrical work. You take your time, you do it right. You don't let anyone tell you that your steady hands and careful work don't matter anymore. Spring morning now, Martin sits in his workshop, radio playing his parents' song, coffee steaming in the old mug. Through the door, he can hear his great-grandchildren exploring the property, Beth teaching them about the land their great-great-grandfather cleared. The crocuses are blooming, stubborn, purple flowers that come back every year, no matter how hard the winter. Martin understands them now. Some things survive because they refuse to quit. Some people matter because they insist on it. Quietly, steadily, without apology. Silence doesn't equal surrender. And legacy isn't something you inherit. It's something you protect. Something you pass on. Something you fight for when fighting is the last thing your tired bones want to do. Martin finishes his coffee, stands, his knees ache, but they hold. His grandson calls from outside. Great-grandpa, come see what we found. Martin Driscoll, 68 years old, walks out into the spring morning. He's still here. He still matters. That's enough.